this monopoly and put some competition into it. We're seeing that now in the electricity sector, and it's playing out in, I think, some similar ways to utilities are acting kind of like cab companies in some instances, and they're acting kind of like AT&T.
So Heather, you just spent some time in China, and I'm interested in developing countries. Oftentimes they jump generations of technology, right? Like people who never had a landline had a cell phone, or people who never had wired internet have Wi-Fi, because there was just no earlier infrastructure to displace, right? So you just got back from China. In fact, instead of being at the Paris Accords, you were in China. Tell us about what you witnessed there.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, just walking down the street in China and being able to see the air and looking at everybody that has a mask on is a pretty scary. I mean, I came back and thought, I could take half of the Republican caucus to China and ask them if this is really what they want.
47% of the audience is clapping.
So you are there, and I had two key things that I took away. The first was I was there talking and working with the government, but also the largest real estate developers in China, because they know that they need to change. They know the way that they're currently doing business is not sustainable. It's not sustainable from a public health perspective. It's not sustainable from an economic perspective, and it's not sustainable from an environmental perspective. So you've got the entire business community on board. You've got the government that's actually behind the business community, and everybody's standing up and saying, you know what, we need to build differently. We need to build more sustainably. And, that's a really powerful dynamic. It's not, I mean, you're not, come back to the United States, you're not going to necessarily see, a Democrat or Republican and the business leaders all say, we're behind new regulation, let's go regulation. So that was sort of lesson number one. And lesson number two was, they have a public health crisis, and they are highly motivated to act. And so the fact that you saw China engage in the international community with a real commitment to drive down greenhouse gas emissions, not only sort of flipped the conversation in the United States, which was to say, we could no longer say we shouldn't act because China's not doing it, and therefore if we do something, we're gonna be at a disadvantage. So it changed that dynamic, but I also think as the United States and China stood together before the international conference of parties took place in Paris, and they both said, we are committed to changing the way we create and use energy. That brought everybody else into the conversation and ultimately led to a deal in which 195 countries stepped forward and said, we are on board. We are going to change our own domestic energy composition, and we're going to work globally to tackle this challenge.
Yeah, that's real good. Congratulations on all the groundwork. We may look back decades from now and see that as a seminal moment in our history. So I know that we've got a guest we want to bring up to talk about sort of how millennials poll on some of these issues.
Yeah, for sure. Lee, come on up. Lee Horwich is the politics editor for USA Today. And one thing that we've been talking about this entire time is that the millennials, our generation, 35 and under, we're going to be the ones to make changes. And one thing that we learned from our Rock the Vote poll, which USA Today is partnering with Rock the Vote, and so we kind of talk about what the poll said and what the results were. One thing that we saw directly is that our generation is going to demand the next president or could demand very well, according to the numbers, the next president to focus on renewable energy. Talk about that.
It was interesting in the poll because, and I never want to correct Mackenzie, but it wasn't 47% of millennials who wanted the next president to do something about energy. It was 80%.
Oh, that's a bigger number.
So I'm just saying.
Glad to be wrong.
What's interesting about that is that meant there wasn't really a partisan divide. There was on other issues, on terrorism, on guns, a little bit more between Republican millennials and the Democratic 18 to 35-year-olds, which is what the poll was doing. So that really shows a unanimity of opinion that's very strong, and as this generation gets older, will only become more and more influential.
And we're talking well, at least by 2030, we're wanting also to transition to clean and renewable energy. Talk about that a little bit more. There was actually, you're connected to that as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually marked that part of the story where we talked to a couple of, a 29-year-old woman named Brianna Stone from Huntsville, Alabama said, global warming, renewable energy, we're not going to take any actions. And by the time we do, it's going to be to the point where it's too late. She wants candidates now and the next president to first and foremost to admit that it's a real thing. Another Scott Ferrari of Seattle is 34, so at the older end of the spectrum says if we don't have a place to live, then it doesn't really make sense to worry about anything else. So that's where it goes to. It's really important to these voters across the partisan line that the next president take this seriously and do something about it.
Cool, thanks, Lee. I'm going to jump back into the audience, and hopefully we're going to hear from you guys soon too.
Thank you, Lee, and thanks to Roscoe Boat and USA Today for sponsoring. That's the first of 4 nationwide polls that we're doing on the issues that One Nation is going to cover over the next 10 months. So look forward to more of that at onenation.usatoday.com. Now, I want us to have a view into what some millennials are doing to start to attack some of these problems. If 80% of their people their age think that this is a huge problem that needs to be dealt with at a political level, what are we doing inside the lab? So I'd like to show you a quick video of one young scientist who's making some pretty amazing discoveries.
We don't want to always think of CO2 as something bad. We want to think of it as, if we have all this CO2, we should do something with it. So that's why I want to do this kind of reaction where I take carbon dioxide and make it into something more useful. And in doing that, you're also going to diversify the way you make energy.
Awesome, okay. So that's a 30-year-old scientist at Caltech. She's from Trinidad and Tobago, and she's looking at different ways to do photosynthesis in a synthetic way. So that's a pretty cool technology that she's pursuing. George, I want to turn to you and talk about, once we have created more energy, how do we store that energy, and how do we move it around to different places where it can't very easily get to right now? Because don't we lose so much of the energy that we have just in the transmission process? You're one of the world's leading experts on batteries, so tell us about some of your research doing that.
Yeah, so batteries really change the way we live. We talked earlier about transportation, that's a battery. So the reason the Tesla, instead of paying $80,000, we hope the vision is you'll pay $20,000 for a car that'll go 200 miles on a single charge. That's a battery problem. You need a battery that's very small, stores a lot of energy, and actually that charges quickly. So if it takes 10 hours to charge, as it does typically with the automotive batteries now, it's very different from the 3 minutes that it takes to fill up your gasoline tank. So these are the issues, and the way you address those issues is to get a better technology. You want the next generation technology instead of lithium-ion batteries, which is the battery in your cell phone. You want them beyond lithium-ion battery. There are many choices there, which is 5 times better. So that's transportation. If you think about the grid, as we were talking about earlier, the grid works on one very simple and fixed principle. You have to generate energy on this side at exactly the same rate instantaneously that you use it on the other side. And that's a huge constraint you don't think about. It means that you have to produce the infrastructure for the peak, because the federal government says never let the lights go out. So we have to build an infrastructure capable of supplying all the air conditioning on the hottest day in the middle of August. That turns out to be about twice the average. So you're building twice the infrastructure that you need. It costs you money to operate that infrastructure. And if you had storage, which would break that coupling between generation and use, you could suddenly generate your energy, let's say in the middle of the night, when the wind blows the hardest, store it in the battery and release it at 6 o'clock in the afternoon the next day when the sun goes down, and that turns out to be when the peak is. So even a solar panel, which operates well during the day and of course not at all at night, doesn't supply the energy at the time that it's most needed. That's really just about sundown. So if you had a battery, it would change that. And I think we don't realize, we realize how the cell phone has changed our life. The way you communicate with people and access information is now instantaneous, and I do it with my cell phone myself. I don't require anything else, any other equipment. That can happen in other areas of our life. The grid, excuse me, the grid can change in that way, make it very personal. It's designed, I'll program it in my house to the electricity to do the things that I want. The electricity will get cheaper because the renewables that Jeff was talking about will be implemented and they'll cost less. And I can use that electricity whenever I want. So I think it's going to be a huge change.
Well, and what about decentralizing? So right now we have kind of like this hub and spoke system where we have a gigantic substation where a lot of the work happens and then it has to go out. But couldn't we generate the electricity on site or close to on site so that we cut down on a lot of the moving parts?
Yeah, absolutely. So you see that all the time in solar panels on your roof. So this happens to both industries, big commercial buildings, and solar panels on the roof. So do residences, and you use that electricity locally. If you had a battery in your garage, which is not the typical thing now, you could store the excess electricity. Let's say you leave during the day and go to work, and maybe you don't have any children, so no one is home during the day. Well, your solar panel is producing electricity. Why don't you store it? And then when you come home at 6 o'clock, you draw on that electricity that came from your own solar panel, a very different model than giving it back to the grid. So if that's the case, you can then start to program your house in the same way that you program your cell phone. So it's attuned to the way you want to live, your living patterns. And you can do it quite independently of your neighbor who might want to program a different way. So these things are coming. And again, I think like we were talking transportation, you may think it's 20 years off. I think it's actually a lot closer than that. There's a change coming, and some people, including, I hate to say, some utilities, maybe haven't quite got the message yet, but it's going to be a powerful force.
Yeah, and it's great if, people like us who have the opportunity to come to a thing like this can have our lives made a little bit safer, a little bit more
My only
convenient.
choice for my electricity is
2 to 3
Mid-America.
billion people around the world who don't have electricity right now, and that deprives them of many things that we would describe as human rights. So what if the battery technologies and the on-site distribution of power were truly possible, as George described?
But I live in a condo.
What are some of the improvements that an ordinary person in the middle of, I don't know, Eritrea or Angola could expect?
Yeah, I think we really take for granted that when we turn the lights on, we flip the switch, the light comes on, and that things that we rely on that require electricity and energy that we don't think about. Refrigeration. If you don't have refrigeration, your food goes bad pretty quickly, and there are a lot of places in the world where they spend a lot of time having to gather and trying to deal with food because they can't store it. Same thing with medicine. I mean, just about all of the modern advances in medicine and healthcare that we've seen over the past number of decades require some sort of electricity, whether it's refrigeration for vaccines, whether it's diagnostics and testing. Things like basic heating, right? And there are villages in Africa where women and children spend most of their day gathering firewood so that they can cook and they can keep warm if necessary. And that has broader implications on things like ability to access education. If you need your kids in order to provide food and heat for your home, they're not going to be going to schools. And then finally, we're sort of experiencing this massive transformation that's possible by the internet and information technology. And we think about things about how knowledge and education and information and all of these things are available around the world. It's true. But it's not true if you don't have access to the electricity or the infrastructure to make that happen. And so there are billions of people in the world who wake up every morning and have to deal with things that we don't even think about because we have access to very cheap.
Amazing advances for people we'll never meet that could come with some of the research that people on this stage are doing. Well, Kara, I think you might be finding some questions out in the audience. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I love that Emily came. She tapped me on my shoulder and she said, Kara, I have a question. So what's your question, Emily?
I want to say, you've mentioned some different renewable energy technologies, but the Clean Energy Plan, or the Clean Power Plan, provides points to states who switch to natural gas. There hasn't been a lot of talk about fracking and the controversy that industry presents for our health and potentially the environment. So how do we as a nation contend with crediting states for those kind of switches and the implications of it?
Heather, would you like to tee off on that one?
First, thank you. I mean, the fact that you even know what the Clean Power power plant. It shows that you're very clued into these issues, which is great, because if we're not, if we don't understand these issues, and we can't hold our elected officials accountable. So thank you. The question is a great question, right? And I guess I'd answer it in a couple different ways. First, when the initial Clean Power Plan was proposed, I think they heard a lot from key stakeholders, including the environmental community, that they were concerned about exactly the problem you mentioned, which is, this is great, but if a state can meet all this compliance by just switching to natural gas, that's probably not in our nation's best interest. So they provided additional incentives for states to actually focus on renewables. So you get additional credits if you front end your plan with renewables. So I'd say that, an important thing happened, which is one, people spoke up and said they want to change in role, and this administration listened. And then the second piece is that the actual nuts and bolts of this proposed rule, and again, just to spend 2 seconds on it, the Obama administration finalized for the first time ever a rule on coal plants that says you have to have a plan to reduce carbon pollution. We have standards on mercury, we have standards on acid gases at these facilities, but we didn't have any standard on carbon pollution. So now states are in the driver's seat. They're figuring out exactly what is their plan to comply. So your state is actually in the driver's seat in terms of how you comply. So the process that the state goes through to figure out what portion are we going to achieve through enhanced energy efficiency, what part of renewables is going to help us comply, and how much are we relying on natural gas to do this is really up to each state. So I would encourage you to engage with your governor and your state officials to make sure that plan
Actually,
is
no.
as green and clean as possible.
Big surprise. I
And then
mean,
the
it's
last
all
thing I will
electronic.
say is,
Yeah, I've had someone
there
else,
are
like a
a lot
couple
of
weeks ago,
moving
ask
pieces
me
when
if
it
I
comes
had
to
any
natural gas.
Well,
business
it's like
There's a
an
lot of
easy
concerns
reference, you
about,
know. Yeah. Okay,
fracking
thank you.
writ large, whether
I guess
that's
I'll have
methane
to
emissions or water
look
contamination,
into that.
just
Yeah.
impacts on communities.
It's like
But in each of those areas,
memory
the
sometimes
administration
can
is
be
actually moving
tricky.
to enhance regulations on federal lands and to control methane. So there's important activity happening to make sure that, to the extent that natural gas is part of a single state solution, that it is cleaner and it is safer.
Yeah, cool. And I think Iowa's in a pretty commanding position in this way because Iowa has incredible natural resources when it comes to clean and renewable energy. And Karen, I know you're fascinated by the wind aspect of this.
Yeah, definitely. But I also want to know if we have time for one more question. Jeff wants to know something about the electric grid.
Hi, yeah, my name is Jeff. I've been reading a couple books lately. One of them is called 1 Second After by William Forstner. It's a hypothetical story about an EMP attack on the United States and the electric grid is out. And after a week, people loot the grocery stores, they're coming to their friends, and they have a gun and they want their neighbor's food. And then another one, Ted Koppel's book, Lights Out. I'm almost done with that book. And it's, I'd like to ask the panel if they could tell me if they think there is a chance, because Ted Koppel has interviewed a lot of experts, and they're saying that some of the countries around the world that want to hack into our electric grid, they can take down the whole grid system, and we literally would be back in the 1800s for months, maybe years. So I'm very concerned about that, the vulnerability of the electric grid, and wondered if the panel can elaborate.
Sure.
But those are the two books. 1 Second After, read that, that's hypothetical, and then Lights Out by Ted Koppel, and it really makes it hard to go to sleep.
I'm not technical enough on EMPs to sort of comment directly on it, but there is a fragility to all of our infrastructure and our electric grid, and I think in addition to the cybersecurity threat, which is very real, there's also just, as the climate changes and see increased intensity of weather events, that puts the grid at risk as well.
Yeah, you get a power surge from that.
And
That could take
some
out a
small sort of foreshadowing, I think. There was an event that happened in the Southwest in Arizona where a transmission line went down and it caused significant loss of power from in Southern California for a pretty significant period of time. That was one malfunction on one power line, and it caused a very serious outage for lots and lots and lots of people. You see hurricanes. You saw Sandy come through the Northeast a few years ago, and that wasn't anything science fiction-y or nefarious. It was freezing rain and ice and wind. And one of the things that, as we talk about what the new sort of grid and a model could look like, is that the more that we're displacing centralized generation with distributed generation, and we're putting more and more parts of the grid and making them more reliant, it decreases the impacts of some of these things. The reason that you would have these month-long or longer types of outages is because we are so reliant on that grid.
Journeyman carpenter by trade.
So like in New York City,
and he's building an electric power plant, natural gas fired power plant. So it's very traditional, and it's centrally. But so we're still building those today.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In Marshall.
I want to relate this actually to Robert to biocement here for a minute. So, you asked a question about security, and that's if somebody's going to come in and do a cyber attack and shut down the grid. But there are other security risks, like you mentioned Hurricane Sandy or other natural disasters where we're incapable of really dealing with that at the scale that it's happening at the time, and that exposes us to weakness, to bad guys coming after us at that moment when our guard is down. Biocement is interesting because one of the worst natural disasters that we can deal with, especially here in Iowa, we felt it, is flooding. So tell us about how you can stave off flooding with some of your advances that you're working on in biocement.
Well, I'd be happy to. Could I start by correcting you on a point you made earlier? Please. I always tell my students who this semester, you said something about creating energy. We do not create energy. If we did, we wouldn't be having this forum tonight. We convert one form of energy to another. And it's either fossil energy or it's renewable energy. And in those transformations, we're either going to do it in a fashion that produces a clean energy form or it's going to be a dirty form. So I wanted to.
No, my physics teacher in high school would be really upset that I made that mistake.
I was concerned my students would be listening to this and they'd be writing down on their midterm that they can create energy. I'm excited for that.
Steve for that.
Very good. Now, biocement. We're working on biocement, bioasphalt, low corrosion, de-icers, carbon fibers, any number of things that don't sound like fuels today. And the reason we're doing that is petroleum is so inexpensive that if we come in and say we're going to produce fuels from biomass, it's not going to be very economically attractive. And I know folks that will go across the street to buy from one gasoline station compared to the other because of 5 cents difference in gasoline prices.
Oh, yeah.
We'll certainly not be willing to pay some of the prices that we have to pay for some of these renewable resources right now. So our strategy is to take biomass and learn how to produce products that don't have to compete with petroleum-based products. And one of those is biocement. And what it is, in the process of pyrolyzing, that's a new term here, pyrolyzing biomass, we actually produce vinegar. And I call it balsamic vinegar because it smells, it has a nice smoky flavor to it.
This is a very well-developed sense of yours.
I make a lot of food analogies and working with biomass.
Yeah, real technical language here.
We take that material and it's essentially vinegar. And we can combine it with limestone. And it will produce a solution that you can spray on, for example, a river levee. And it absorbs in the soil. And we've also injected a bacteria in there that uses that vinegar and that limestone as a source of energy and a source of producing a cement type of material. And we'll actually bind those soil particles or sand particles together and form a cement type of material. I mentioned a levee because floods are often the result of the failure of levees. And levees often fail not because they are burrowed into, but because the water reaches the top of the levee, flows over, and then it just erodes away that levee. So we're looking at this biocement as a way to stabilize those levees and handle some of these extreme weather events.
Yeah, which are becoming more extreme more often. But that's pretty awesome. I mean, I love the description. What you said, bacteria plus vinegar, sounds a lot like something that is in the back of my fridge right now. Keeping the levee strong. And I know this is close to home for you and a lot of Iowans here who have dealt with floods. Tell us about what happened in Elkader in, I think, 2008.
In Elkader, Iowa, which is in the northeastern corner of the state, a little town of about 1,200 people. It's a very idyllic, lovely town that has the Turkey River, which flows through it. The Turkey River is really beautiful unless there's a 100-year flood and it's taking out entire portions of your entire community. And as I was growing up, this happened obviously in 2008, but it had happened previously, and you think you have a 100-year flood and they tell you it'll never happen again, but it happened numerous times in our community. So many times, in fact, it actually drove our citizens to take a step back and say, okay, we have rebuilt these homes now going on 4 times. Is this really the right way to do it? And there were decisions at the local level, there were decisions at the federal governmental level. FEMA saying, look, you can't continue to buy these people out and to pay to rebuild in these same floodplains. But ultimately, the entire east end of our hometown, they just decided to level them. I mean, the homes that were there, they just moved everybody to a different location. Luckily, we had the resources from our terrific local universities to help us figure out how to restore the floodplain, but ultimately the decision was made, look, we can't, this is a fool's errand to try and keep rebuilding the city because it's going to just keep washing away. Now, that's not the same story that's going to be told in every community in Iowa or even across the United States, but I think there are some important lessons to learn, which is, we can continue to ignore that extreme weather events are going to be impacting our lives on a more regular basis, or we can stand up and do something about it. And I think certainly for me, that's why I've worked on these issues on climate change. I'm trying to get policy right. I've worked on it my entire career and will continue to be dedicated to it. But again, to earlier points that you made, as many challenges as our communities are facing, they're also really stepping up and being part of the solution by being a national leader in wind production, by trying to tap into the resources of solar and really doing a lot of work to show the country that it can be done.
Yeah, no, it's true, and some of those advances could save lives and save communities. I know the people of New Orleans would love to have had your technology that you're talking about. I know I lived in the floodplain of Lake Okeechobee in Florida, and we were constantly living in terror of the lake breaching the levee in a hurricane. Kara, how's it going out there in the audience?
Good. We're having a great time. How's the beer? Is it good?
Yeah.
You guys are good? Okay.
I wouldn't know.
So we want to do a reality check moment. We want to make sure that we're answering everyone's questions and kind of, getting it right. And you had a question that you wanted to ask about electric cars. So we're going to backtrack a little bit, but we want to make sure your voices are heard too.
Sure, so we've been hearing a lot about using batteries in vehicles and potentially at home. We're curious about the energy impact on manufacturing these batteries, what that has, and potentially what happens when the batteries are no longer usable, the waste of those and the energy or the environment impact on those as well.
Great question. So if you look at lead acid batteries, which we all have in our cars to start every morning, those things are recycled at some phenomenal level. I think it's about 95%. We don't even know it as a user. In fact, I just bought 2 new batteries from Sears just before the holiday break. My old battery miraculously went away. That's because that recycling technology has been developed highly. It turns out the used or discarded lead acid battery is still valuable. It's cheaper to recycle that than it is to mine new materials. That's the model that has to be applied to all the new batteries out there. So the lithium-ion batteries in your cell phone and in some of the electric cars are generally not recycled. And the reason is simply that we haven't developed the technology. Lots of people are looking at that. When you look at beyond lithium-ion batteries, so what would be 5 times better than the lithium-ion batteries we have now, it's a major question. People are looking, for example, for grid batteries at organic active materials because they're cheap, they're highly abundant, you can recycle them back to their elemental form, they'll be benign on the environment. And I think if you went back 10 years even, and probably 5 years ago it was starting, go back 10 years, you would think about how to recycle the battery you're about to invent. That'd be the lowest thing on your list, and you'd think about it after you already invented it. Now we think about that in advance. So that's one of the things. So we're working on next generation batteries. It's one of our, on our checklist. How would you recycle this?
Yeah, very good. Now the metal that goes into lithium ion batteries, lithium is available here in the United States in Wyoming. It's available in some other places that are harder to get to and less friendly to us, like Bolivia or Chile. It's also in abundant supply in Afghanistan. And so I wonder if we're doubling down on lithium, are we in some way trading like Saudi Arabia and Iraq for Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's a great question. People think about that all the time. So studies have been done, in fact some have been done at Argonne, at a great life cycle group there. And their conclusion was that if you look at the known reserves, including the ones in Bolivia and Chile, there is enough, and then you ask the question, if some large fraction, I've forgotten the number, but 50% of the cars in the world became powered by lithium-ion batteries, it's a huge change, would there be enough lithium? And the answer was, yes, the known reserves are enough if you recycle. If you don't recycle, it's not quite so clear, but I could imagine you would run into trouble quickly. And this was one of the studies, which is now about 3 or 4 years old, which triggered the interest in how do you recycle the lithium and lithium-ion batteries. Turns out, everyone talks about lithium. The most expensive component in a lithium-ion battery actually is not the lithium, it's the cobalt, which goes into the cathode. It just happens to be very expensive. So there's a big push on to find a replacement for cobalt, not so much because it's scarce, but just because it costs money.
Very good. That's good. Now, Kara, where are you?
I'm over here, Mackenzie.
Lost track of you. There you are. What are you finding out here on the floor?
Well, I'm finding out that people want us to talk more about nuclear energy.
Sure.
Can we go there?
Yeah, why not?
Are we ready to go there?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Well,
I'm coming back here. We're ready for your question. Did I get you off mic? The beer is so good. You're enjoying it. But wait, one more thing though. I want to remind people to register to vote. Rock the Vote is back there, so don't forget that. That's why we're here, to be more informed about the issues. But let's talk nuclear, something that you're interested in.
Okay, thank you. I just went from beer to whiskey, so I think I'm going to hold up okay. I hope so. Okay, there is a young woman. And I think she kind of looks like that impressive young woman on the stage, actually. She is a PhD nuclear physicist. I think you all have heard of her. I can't remember her name, but I bet you know who she is. Who has developed a nuclear power plant model that operates on spent nuclear fuel, that renders no spent fuel at the end of a run. And I want your thoughts on how viable this kind of small nuclear model would be. Is it commercially viable? Is it viable from a safety, reliability, regulatory standpoint?
Great question. Jeff, you're our resident nuclear expert.
I think you're talking about Leslie Dewan and it's Transatomic Power is her company. And I work with a think tank called Third Way. We're looking into some of these questions. I think we've only scratched the surface on what's possible with nuclear power. And right now in the United States, about 19% of our electricity is generated by nuclear power. And that's 60% of our carbon-free energy in the United States. So if you think about where clean energy, carbon-free energy is coming from, a big part of that is nuclear energy. And nuclear does have the advantage of not having this intermittency problem that we see with wind and solar. Once it's on, it can run for long periods of time, and you can count on it day and night, windy and not windy. There are some obvious challenges with nuclear power. They come and they tend to be kind of in 3 areas. Safety, which is obviously the biggest one. Cost, which is actually related to safety. Because we want to make sure these plants are very, very safe, we require very complex engineering to keep them safe. And then the last part are sort of the externalities around waste and potential for proliferation. You don't want things out there that could be used to develop weapons. There are a set of technologies that a lot of young people, frankly, are looking at. And Leslie's technology is a molten salt reactor. That's what's called walk-away safe, which means that in the event that you lose power to the reactor, you can walk away from that reactor and shut itself down by itself, which means that it becomes cheaper to build because you don't have to have all the redundant belts and suspenders that you do with light water types of reactor. And you're right, the reactor is designed to run on spent nuclear fuel, or nuclear waste, as we tend to refer to it. You know, nuclear waste is interesting because in a traditional light water reactor, we only use about 5% of the energy in that uranium. 95% of that power is still available. So Leslie's technology, and there are others like this, I'm just going off of your example. You know, Leslie's technology could be put in place, and if it works, and if it's cost effective, there's enough nuclear waste in the world to provide clean energy for the entire globe for 60 years, right? And so obviously there are things we have to think about and deal with, but as we talked about, whether it's batteries and what do you do with the recycling and how do you get the lithium, you know, whether it's you know, fracking, as the question was raised, where, you know, a lot of our reduction in emissions over the last few years has been a result of cheap natural gas displacing coal. You know, these are not easy issues, and it's one of the things I think that it's really important for voters to think about when you're talking about these candidates who come here and give you really great answers that are 1 or 2 sentences long. There are trade-offs in all of these choices, and the climate challenge is so big, in my mind, that we have to put on the table every potential solution to get our carbon emissions down as quickly as possible. And I think if we've got a lead, if we've got the ability to fund and invest in R&D to bring a technology like transatomic powers technology, then that's a very appropriate role for the federal government. We ought to be encouraging that kind of R&D.
How far back did how far back was nuclear energy set by the Fukushima meltdown disaster?
Well,
if at all.
I think it's a different answer depending upon where you are in the world. You know, there was a lot of interest in expanding nuclear power in Asia and Europe prior to Fukushima, and it did create a significant setback. Germany is a great example. Even Japan is still struggling and wrestling with this question. And so I think one of I think the climate challenge does call for us to try to keep as much clean energy online as possible. But I think part of the reason that you want to invest in these advanced technologies is because they overcome some of the problems that the light water reactor is solving.
Sure. That's some really awesome science. Now, but all the decisions that we make about our energy future are ultimately political ones, and that's one of the reasons why you're here. And so I'd ask Jason Noble from the Des Moines Register to make your way up here, because I want to ask your perspective on a couple of questions here as about the politics of Iowa. But while he's coming up, I just want to throw to one quick little tape that's an example of a young scientist from the generation of the people in this room who's doing some outstanding work in nuclear energy. So can you roll that real quick?
I will never forget watching a congressional hearing on nuclear waste. And I know that literally sounds like the most boring thing in the world to many people. But as they scanned the room, no one looked like me. No one had the same perspectives and the same beliefs or the same thoughts or the same ideas that I did. And I decided that someday I was going to be a person who was going to be testifying in those congressional hearings with a bright red mohawk or a gorgeous scarf, so that way when that other kid turned on C-SPAN, they were like, oh, okay. It doesn't matter what I look like. It matters what passion I bring to the table.
27-year-old nuclear scientist from MIT working on spent fuel and trying to generate clean, renewable electricity from that. Well, Jason, come on up. I want to talk to you here for a second. Jason is on the politics and government team here at the Des Moines Register. You're doing a heck of a job. Thank you. Now, all the choices that we make around here are politically fraught. Of course, there are winners and losers in them. I want to start off talking about the Bakken pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Here in Iowa, even though we're not drilling for oil or fracking so much here, you stand here in Iowa between liquid gas and the refineries. And so there's this pipeline, and that is a really charged issue here. How do Iowans feel on that?
Yeah, that's
We don't
really
want
an
it.
issue that's unresolved right now and really generating a lot of conversation. Basically, we're talking about a pipeline that is proposed to link the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota to a spot in Illinois that is kind of a distribution point for crude oil. It's a $3.8 billion project. Eventually carry 570,000 barrels of oil a day through the state. Cuts through 18 counties on a diagonal straight through the state. Obviously generating a lot of discussion here. I think there's some people in the room who have been pretty active on this issue. And there's really a lot of different things that people are talking about. You know, there's a concern that if we build another pipeline, kind of the same conversation we had over the Keystone XL pipeline, that we're encouraging more development, more use of fossil fuels that we know contribute to climate change. You know, there's also the question of what happens if there's an oil spill. You know, this pipeline could break open somewhere on the richest farm fields in the world. Those
Or
are
be
big
broken
concerns.
open by some evil doer.
Sure. Yeah. And so that question is ongoing. There's a couple of different state agencies that are looking into this. The Department of Natural Resources has to okay a few things. The Iowa Utilities Board has to okay it. There's been a lot of contentious public meetings about that, and we'll get a resolution in the next few weeks or months here.
When you describe it as a $3.5 billion project, to me that also sounds like a lot of jobs. So there's that side of it.
Absolutely. You know, the labor unions, the people that know they'd be working on this project potentially for months or years are very supportive of it.
Now this pipeline, it can't just zigzag all over the place to, you know, whoever feels like selling their land. There's an eminent domain question here too.
Yeah, that's the other big factor here, not only with the pipeline, but also with a similar project, transmission lines. There's a proposal out there to build these a long transmission line that would carry the wind energy that we're developing out in northwest Iowa to markets in the east. In both cases, there's a lot of questions over eminent domain about taking private land to build these projects. People don't like the idea of having massive energy lines in their backyard or having a pipeline running under their farmland, and that's something that remains to be resolved too.
Sure. Now, another issue here in the state is the renewable fuel standard, and whether that'll be repealed or taken off the books, I guess I should say. So where do Iowans stand on that really vexing issue?
Well, on that issue, I think Iowans are pretty united on this. There's strong political support across the spectrum for preserving the subsidies and the programs that are out there that support ethanol and biofuels, also the wind energy tax credit. The problem there is that we're facing is threats from Washington and people who want to see this subsidy go away. This is a big issue on the caucus campaign trail. There's a lot of industry groups and people that are interested in preserving those programs here in Iowa, testing the presidential candidates on whether they're going to be supportive of those subsidies going forward.
Got it, yeah. Now I've heard Iowa referred to as a Silicon Prairie, and so there's a lot of great technological innovations going on here, but some of the big winners in the technology sweepstakes, the Facebooks, Googles, Microsofts of the world, they want to set up shop right here in Iowa because they want to be seen as using green energy. So what has that been in terms of an economic development opportunity for Iowa?
Absolutely. We have data centers for Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all across the state, Council Bluffs, here in the Des Moines metro area. And a big part of that is they want to be able to say the energy that goes into these huge data centers that use a lot of power is coming from renewable sources like wind. Iowa's able to provide that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. That's an example of the kind of expertise that you're getting from the Des Moines area. So, thank you. One of the political issues that, Robert, I know touched you, and I'm going way back now, was that when farmers can grow corn or soybeans or whatever it is, they have markets that they want to export that product to, but sometimes politics gets in the way, and that happened back in 1985. It actually led to your father losing his farm in Missouri. Can you tell us about that?
So back in the early 80s, there would actually in the late 70s, there had been a move to go to export markets for agriculture. We had the ability to produce a lot of corn and soybeans in the United States. That decision led to exporting grain to the Soviet Union. And at some point, boy, it's still in the news, Afghanistan was invaded by the Soviets. And the United States made a decision to embargo the export of grain. And the loss of market to the American farmer because of this change in policy resulted in losses of farms. My father lost a good part of his farmland as a result of that.
And what do we learn
policy
from
decision.
that lesson from today's discussion? How do we apply that?
Well, today we're talking about dropping the RFS, the renewable fuel standards. It was a policy decision made a few years ago to support the build-out of alternative fuel markets. A lot of American farmers have invested in the ethanol plants that exist today. Federal government's invested a lot of money in developing technology. And to make a decision to change in policy at this point would not only devastate these people's investments that they've made, but also would reduce our ability to build out these technologies in the future. So I see a direct analogy with the policy changes, the decisions that were made about exporting grain in the 1980s with the discussion today on getting rid of RFS.
Yeah, thank you for that personal story. And the link to Iowa there is that when that happened to your father, 20,000 of the 120,000 family farms in Iowa went under at that time. So pretty big deal. Here, I think you've got somebody who wants to ask a question, or maybe you want to ask one.
Well, I actually have two people, Matt and Bernie. They're ready for a zinger. You know, Mackenzie, we want a wild card from the panel, something totally unexpected. Guys, what's on your mind?
So, you know, we touched on a lot of different topics tonight, anywhere from biomass to electric cars, nuclear energy, and policy. So we're wondering, what can you guys tell us, something that we don't already know here in the crowd tonight about energy that you want us to kind of take home? What's a take-home message that we don't already know?
I've already got to say, I've already taught them everything I know. These are they are critical entrepreneurs in bioenergy today.
So I actually have an answer for that.
Yeah, why don't you go for it?
I think we're in a period of change, that's clear, that's what we've been talking about. That change is coming a lot faster than you think. I'll leave it at that.
One more audience question. You have something to say up to.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about creating energy, but what about reducing how much we use? One of the technologies that stands out in my mind, which also helps with flooding, which is what Kevin was talking about, are green roofs, where it helps the house reduce energy by insulating it. So do you have any thoughts on that?
The short answer is when we're thinking about solutions to climate challenges, if you think about what are the sources of carbon pollution, transportation, buildings, and electricity generation. And the quickest way to fix the buildings piece of the puzzle is to think about how we use less energy in the built environment. And I think you point to green roofs, but there are so many new technologies that are coming off the marketplace, whether that's Nest, that is giving you the ability to have more control over your own energy bill. When you turn on, when you choose to use energy, understanding what that means for your bill, giving consumers more choice. The important role that green roofs play are certainly, again, something that we need to embrace. But I also think that, we've talked a lot tonight about how the private sector and the public sector can work together to solve some of these challenges. And, you can throw all the money in the world at this, but you have to have the right policies in place, which is why I'm really excited actually about the Clean Power Plan, because it is, I know I've said this previously, but it is going to put, your state in charge of figuring out how you meet a carbon reduction goal. And energy efficiency is the cheapest, fastest, and quickest way to do that. So energy efficiency, all sorts of different improvements in the home, from green roofs to more efficient windows, are going to be a very obvious solution for the state to meet those objectives.
Very good. Well, the few minutes that we have left, just want to turn our attention to national security and global security, because energy is really very directly related to those things. And Kara, I've lost track of you again, but
I'm actually right behind you.
Yeah, I know you're interested in a story Heather told about Alaska.
Yeah. So oftentimes I think as millennials, the ideas that we have about energy and even climate change come from movies. And I remember reading this one story about an Alaskan village that was really experiencing the effects of climate change, which are interconnected in topics here tonight. And so Heather, do you mind sharing that story? When I was reading it, I was like, this can't possibly be real, but it was kind of a wake-up call that the energy topic goes way beyond just electric cars and washing machines that are efficient and solar panels. Talk about that.
So, one of the big challenges with climate change is how do you actually connect with American families and help them understand why this is real? We sort of have struggled to figure out the right way to talk about this from Washington, and as somebody who was a key staffer on the last 3 presidential races on energy and climate policy, I can't tell you I perfected the model, because in one instance we used to say, like, in 2050 things are going to look really, really bad, which everybody's like, great, that doesn't matter to me. 2050 sounds a billion years away. I'm just worried about today. And then we sort of switched gears to be more like, you are going to die and everything is going to change. And we tried to scare people, which also didn't actually work, and people just kind of tuned it out. So what I think is really important as we think about this issue, and certainly as I think about it as, from my position in Washington and trying to figure out how do I help politicians communicate these big, weighty issues, the reason that I even went to Alaska was to understand what does it really look like for a community that's faced every day with climate change. And I landed on this little bit of land on the very north slope of Alaska. And the first thing I saw when I got out of the plane was an actual house falling into the sea. And it's a community of Native Alaskans that have lived a subsistence lifestyle for many, many centuries. And everything that they know and everything that they have done is changing. And there's no easy solution. I mean, what do? Do you move your entire community 7 miles inland where it doesn't quite work, right? Like, you rely on the sea for all your food. You can't drag a whale 7 miles in, just hoofing it. So there are so many challenges with this, and I think what was important for me was to see that this isn't a challenge that is in 2050 that we're going to face, and it's not just about am I going to have to use the air conditioner more? It's about impacting an entire way of life. And I think that's also what was so important even about President Obama's trip to Alaska this summer. It helps connect the dots. And it helps people understand, this is not a far off challenge. We have communities that are faced with this every day. And, certainly I hold very dear to me the lessons that I learned in a little town called Shishmaref. But they're not alone. They're there, and if we don't act, we're going to have more communities all over the world that are facing the same challenges.
Yeah. No, and that is a clear and present example, right? But Alaska is really far away, and that town is really little, and maybe it's even hard to grasp the connections between that and our daily lives. But so let's take it like several orders of magnitude higher. The Syrian diaspora, the rise of ISIS, these are in some way related to climate change, right? People don't have enough food because there's a drought, because of climate change, and therefore a war breaks out. Is that an accurate analysis? Is there any truth to that?
Well, the short answer is yes, but don't take my word for it. I mean, the Defense Department calls it a threat multiplier, and wrote extensively about the risks associated and the threats to homeland because of climate change. And I think we've only begun to understand what those challenges look like, and it's beginning to be part of our broader conversation on climate change. But certainly your analysis is spot on.
Yeah, and it's scary stuff. Well, I think we're, coming up on the time that we committed, and probably everybody wants to go get another beer. I definitely do. Let's see. You know what? We're just gonna hold off because we're wrapping up. There's gonna be time for them to answer questions. Okay, sir.
Well, they're saying no, but we're definitely going to have time for the panelists to talk to everyone in the room. They're going to stick around, but we want to also give them a chance to wrap up. So if you have a question I didn't get to you, don't fret. They'll be around, and I'll be around, and Mackenzie will be around.
And you will have the chance to ask all these folks because they'll be out there in the crowd here in a second.
For sure.
Yeah, good. So I want to give everybody a chance to kind of, you've taught us a lot. Thank you. And I think everybody in the room can say they're a smarter voter when they go to the caucus this year in a little while. So first thing I want to do is ask you to help me thank them for all the expertise. Each of you, 30 seconds to sort of put a bow on this. Give us a final point that you think is most important as we walk away. Maybe underscoring something we've already done or making a point that we haven't heard. Robert, I'd look to you first. What is the most important takeaway here?
I think we need to recognize that going simply carbon neutral is not enough. At some point, we need to go carbon negative. Technologies that actually can grow And I just want to point, if you're interested in that technology, you got to talk to these young guys that were asking those questions.
We will catch up with them. George?
So I think that there's a huge difference, a huge generational difference. You guys at the millennial level are the future. And I can tell from some of the stuff we've seen here on video and your questions, you think differently. And I'll tell you, I'm very refreshed by that. So I would encourage you not to be constrained by, let's say, conventional wisdom of your elders, but go out there and discover something new.
Very good. Jeff?
So, a quick story, an optimistic story about West Virginia that just happened this week that I think points to how important it is for millennials and young people to stay engaged in these issues. There was a debate in West Virginia about whether or not they should sue the Obama administration over the Clean Power Plan or try to comply. The utility there, as you might imagine, uses a whole lot of coal. They presented the plan to the state of West Virginia that said, we're moving off of coal, we're moving off of coal for two reasons. One, natural gas and renewables are cheaper, and it just makes better economic sense. The second thing that they cited was that 77% of people under the age of 50 believe that climate change is real and is going to and it has to be dealt with. Why is that relevant? Because they're making investment decisions over a period of years, about 40 years or so. And they said, we just can't imagine a scenario in which there isn't some kind of policy to constrain carbon. So even though we might not have a consensus among, say, 10 or so people running for president, there is already an impact that comes from people being engaged and active on these issues. So it does make a difference, it does matter, and we're only going to get there if people continue to do
I guess my message would be, if you tune into the conversation that's happening in Washington, it can be pretty depressing and pathetic when it comes to climate policy. But, we come here, we're in the heartland, we're having a conversation, we're engaging in a real way about what are the solutions, who is part of the solution, and how do we actually get this done? And so I guess my message to you would be, don't be entirely dismayed by what you're hearing in Washington, because states are stepping up, like Iowa, and you're doing real things to make a real difference. And I think, it is, well, it might not be the transition we want to see happening as quickly as we want. I think, the changes that we're seeing from a technological perspective on the policy front are huge. And the future looks really bright in terms of our ability to collectively take on this challenge. So thank you.
That's really good. I think we should talk the fact that 150 of you or so here, the results of the poll that Rock the Vote did and USA Today did show what an important issue climate change and renewable clean energy is to voters like you here in Iowa. I want to show you a quick look at a scientist at Arizona State who I think really puts the time is of the essence aspect of this in perspective.
I think that we're definitely racing against an imaginary clock. I think every year that goes by, we hear another report that it was the hottest year on record, that we are increasingly in deep water, no pun intended. I think that at some point there's a limit to the amount of pain that the world can take, and at that point we'll act. I think the danger is that point going to be too late? As a millennial, we think in idealistic terms, we look at a problem and we say, why can't that work? And then we go forth and try to address it.
Cool. That really puts a great bow on it. And also, we're going to have Ashley from Rock the Vote, the president of Rock the Vote, the woman who works with all the celebrities. Ashley, we're so glad to partner with you, USA Today. We're really excited. Kind of talk about your mission and why you're here today. We want people to vote.
And welcome home.
Huh?
And welcome home to the
Yes. Thank you for having me, and we're so grateful to be partnering with OneNation on these events. And this was at one point home for me. I lived up the street in Des Moines, so I'm really excited to be here, to be kicking this series off. We are here with Rock the Vote. Anyone in the room not registered yet? You're gonna make your way to the back corner for us. Rock the Vote was founded 25 years ago to really make sure that all of the young people in this country understand the power that they have. And that is even more important today. The millennial generation is the largest living generation. It's the largest generation in our country's history. We outnumber the baby boomers by almost 20 million. By sheer numbers alone, we are going to decide the future of this country. And it is so important that everybody in this room make sure that they're encouraging all of the young people in this country to get out there and make their voice heard. And so I know I am the last thing standing between all of you and the free beer in the corner. So I will say one more thing. We came out here with a lot of t-shirts, which I am modeling. I do not want to carry them home. If you go to the back corner of the room, there's free t-shirts for signing up for our list. Please do that for us. And make sure you get out there and caucus. 18 more days. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for Rock the Vote. All right. Raise your hand if you feel smarter after listening to our wonderful panelists tonight. Show of hands. I feel a lot smarter. I'm also ready to party. Mackenzie, are you going to dance with me tonight? All right. So we're going to bring back DJ Bringing G. Our panelists are going to stick around if anyone has any questions. But I just want to make sure that we end this the right way. So when I say one, you say nation. One. All right, stick around. In 30 minutes, the Maytags are going to get up here and rock the house. So thanks a lot.
The Maytags are a local band.
You guys are great. Good night.
They take their name from the company that used to be an independent producer of home appliances, home and commercial appliances like washers, dryers, dishwashers, refrigerators, and freezers. That company got bought out by Whirlpool, and then their main plant in Newton, Iowa got closed down after the Whirlpool bought the Maytag company out, and Whirlpool closed that plant, and so many jobs were lost. So this band is named in honor of that company that used to be an Iowa company. I'm plugging from my power pack because I ran on my power pack. I burned one. I just tightened up my my tripod, and I'm going to use it as a monopod. I'm going to wander around the room. And just to make sure that I got a stable connection, I'm going to carry my hotspot with me. So I'm just going to wander around the room and just capture conversations. And I'm gonna also wander over to this back corner where the Rock the Vote people are. You know that sign is kind of holy, don't you? What? That sign is kind of holy. Sorry, I couldn't resist. How's it going back here? I said, how's it going back here? It's kind of dark back here. There's not much light, but it's the shirt is, or this is black with the white on a black background. It's a bag. It's a reusable tote bag. I'm just showing my viewers what's going on back here. You're kind of dark, you know. You need a little more light.
Those are my cameras.
Yeah. What? Only two? Gotta have more than that. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Hello. I'm sorry?
Did you see Bernie the other night?
I was over at the fairgrounds.
Yeah, I saw you there.
Yeah, I streamed that, but then for some reason Ustream did not save my the major portion of my video. I had a signal break.
Oh no!
And then I had to change batteries because I didn't.
No, but the speech was so inspiring.
Yeah, so unfortunately, no, it was last night that I was streaming that I didn't know. Now my Bernie video, that's on YouTube.
Nice, nice.
And then he was also at the First Christian Church earlier in the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
For the
He's
family.
been everywhere, man.
Yeah, so I went from that church to the fairgrounds. So I was streaming the whole dang day.
Oh my God. Are you gonna caucus for Bernie?
I can't because I lost my voting rights, even though I have no known felonies on my record.
Oh. Hey, what is happening?
But that doesn't stop me from encouraging others.
Hey, I've heard of it, but I have no idea what you do. All right, so we're a nonprofit arts and culture.
So they are from the Des Moines Social Club, and I have streamed there several times. Over here, it's hard to focus these. There we go. This is Rock the Vote. There, now then look so the light is a little better. These are just little Oh, that's upside down. No wonder it wasn't showing.
I have extra large and one small.
Extra large.
All right.
It says vote fearlessly. Oh, and rock the vote on it. So, just little buttons here. And then there are shirts. So she has one of the Rock the Vote shirts on. There's little buttons here, and then there's some slightly bigger ones. Can you give me one of the like this? Like vote fearlessly. This one says vote fearlessly. This one says
I knew it was just the one. Thank you so much.
good. So what they are doing is registering people online. We have online voter registration now here in Iowa. So they are using, especially since those people will pick up a tablet, fill in the form, or you can still do the paper registrations, or go to the county auditor's office and register, or register at an election, a polling place during an election. So that's how that works.
Hi.
Hello.
Would you like to pledge to rock the vote?
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot vote. I don't have my rights, even though I have no known felonies on my record.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
So I'm just giving my viewers a look at what you're doing here.
Okay. Well, just be sure not to publish to show any of this stuff, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can't focus on that anyway.
Would you like to pledge to rock the vote? Because that can be, even if you don't want to, if you're unable to vote, you can try to get community members or your viewers to vote.
Yeah.
And then give you a shirt.
Morning chicken. Rock the vote. Just gonna roam the room a little bit. So back here is the brains of the operation. Other posters on the wall are just, part of the usual Woolies decor. Dark, so sorry about that, but I don't want to turn my light on because since I'm roaming, the amount of light's going to change anyway. So as you can see, the DJ's console's back up on the stage, setting up for the band. The Maytag. They'll be playing later. I'll probably head out before that. I'm not sure yet. t-shirts that they picked up.